Shadow Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and we're grateful to the Minister for running through the plethora of government amendments which have been added to this already stonkingly large finance bill. And I think the sheer number of amendments is an admission that ministers didn't get this right first time or even second time in the committee stage proceedings, which we enjoyed. But I'll now turn to the amendments 1 to 8 and 67 to 94, as well as new clause 10 in my name and that of my honourable friends. And this finance bill embodies Labour's approach of ever higher taxes, higher spending and higher borrowing, and it's hard-working families and businesses that are paying the price. The measures in this budget and this bill add a further £26 billion worth of tax rises, bringing the cumulative total from the Chancellor's first two budgets to £66 billion, which, as my humble friend pointed out, did not feature anywhere in the manifesto. And that's despite the Chancellor promising not to come back for more. Debt interest is forecast to hit £140 billion by 2030. Unemployment is set to increase to 1.9 million. Youth unemployment has risen to 16.1%. And meanwhile, welfare spending is set to hit £406 billion. And living standards are expected to slow towards the end of this Parliament. And growth. Last week, the OBR downgraded its growth forecast once again. And they warned that the Chancellor's plan, far from working, could constrain economic activity. And instead of backing the risk takers and the wealth creators, this finance bill delivers slower growth, higher borrowing and higher taxes. Now, Madam Deputy Speaker, let me turn first to the freeze in income tax thresholds set out in clause 10. The Chancellor stood at that dispatch box and said there would be no extension of the freeze on income tax thresholds because it would hurt working people and take more money out of their pay slips. That promise has been broken by the measures in the bill that do exactly the opposite, putting in place a £23 billion a year tax rise, bringing nearly 1 million more people into paying higher rate tax. And of course, it's not just working people who will pay the price of this. During this period, the state pension is forecast to be higher than the personal allowance. And in the spring forecast, the OBR warned that an additional 1 million pensioners will find themselves liable for income tax by 2030-31 because of this freeze, the Chancellor's freeze. That is, in anyone's book, a retirement tax. And now the government has promised to protect people who rely solely on the state pension. But where is the detail? There's nothing in this legislation to do that. And people, the public out there, will rightly be sceptical, given the broken promises the Chancellor has already made, saying she wouldn't freeze this threshold to do so. So Amendment 5 offers the House a very simple choice to stand by working people and by pensioners and to end the freeze. I turn now to the government's damaging family farm and family business tax. And I know honourable members opposite are going around their constituencies saying they got a great win from the Chancellor just before Christmas. But let's be honest, that was purely a fig leaf. The government could have taken the opportunity to actually correct their mistake, but the partial reversal the Chancellor was forced into falls short. The Country Land and Business Association has said that this only limits the damage, yet another broken promise from a Prime Minister who pledged not to impose inheritance tax on farms. And it epitomises Labour's apparent hostility towards family farms, tenant farmers and our rural communities. And I've spoken to farmers, I'm sure other honourable members have, who are desperate about this situation. And that's why we continue to strongly oppose this family farm and family business tax, and Amendment 6 would scrap them. Our further amendments seek to mitigate its worst effects. Amendments 67 to 87 would remove the transition period on changes to the release and delay implementation until after March 2027, lifting the unfair anti-forestalling rules that have tied the hands of farmers and business owners. And the Chartered Institute of Taxation, who provide a lot of support, which I'm grateful for during the committee in earlier stages, have warned that these measures particularly affect older farmers, robbing them of the ability to plan properly. Amendment 88, Madam Deputy Speaker, would defer the deadline for inheritance tax instalments by a further 12 months. This reflects the House of Lords Economic Affairs Committee conclusion that the 6-month deadline proposed for the first payment does not appear to be realistic. Farming estates and family businesses are often, as we know, asset-rich but cash-poor, making it difficult to raise the funds quickly. The NFU has warned that expecting probate to be granted within 6 months is completely unrealistic, especially given the complexity of valuing an agricultural business. Does the Minister recognise the strain that such unrealistic deadlines place on family farms and family businesses? And will he therefore accept our amendment and extend the payment deadline to 12 months? And if he won't do that, will he explain to the farming and family businesses why not? Amendments 89 to 94 would exclude for inheritance tax the value of any jointly held tenancy on the death of a joint tenant. This is causing concern across the sector and has been raised by the Tenant Farmers Association and by my honourable friend at the, who sits on the front bench. Exempting genuine arm's-length tenancies between unconnected parties from inheritance tax is simply the fair thing to do. And again, I'd be grateful to the Minister to explain what engagement he's had with the Tenant Farmers Association on this point and what his response is and how he intends to rectify the injustice. Of course, this is not just about farms. Family businesses are firmly in the Chancellor's crosshairs as well. They make up 90% of our firms and employ well over half the workforce. These are firms that focus on the long term. Yet, according to Family Businesses UK, over half of affected businesses have already paused or cancelled investment as a result of this threatened tax. And of course, it would be remiss not to mention that the government's claims don't seem to add up. Will it actually end up raising money? While the OBR forecasts a £500 million gain, the CBI analysis suggests a net loss of nearly £2 billion once the wider damage to the economy is considered. So the family farm and family business tax does nothing to promote growth or fairness. It targets those who anchor our rural economy and communities, the family businesses committed to long-term growth. It's already having a chilling effect on investment. Now the prospect is a breakup of companies that otherwise would thrive under family stewardship. So again, I urge honourable members to support Amendment 6, which would remove this damaging measure. And savers and investors are not safe from the Chancellor either. Amendments 1 to 4 cover the introduction of increases in income tax on dividends, on savings and on property income in the years ahead. Increases to the dividend tax will hit 4 million people by 2029-30. The savings tax rate increase will hit a further 3.8 million individuals. And now 2.4 million landlords will face higher bills, making it less attractive to provide the rental properties our constituents want. These measures are targeted at the entrepreneurs, the investors, the pensioners and hard-working families. And rather than supporting growth, the government seems determined to stifle it. Madam Deputy Speaker, the government is also scrapping the long-standing inheritance tax exemption for pensions. 10,500 estates will be targeted under this measure, costing savers £1.5 billion by 2029. We oppose this extension of inheritance tax, which seems predicated on the government's belief that people's money belongs to the government rather than being their own. We should be rewarding saving and people who do the right thing, and extending inheritance tax in this way does exactly the opposite. There's also concern, as we discussed previously, around the burden being placed on personal representatives, and I raise the unintended consequences for unmarried couples, where in some cases a surviving partner could lose up to 40% of a pension fund built up over a lifetime. Again, this is manifestly unfair, and Amendment 7 would remove this damaging new tax from the bill. Happily give way.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend for giving way. I wonder if he notices a common thread through the budget, which is that everyone that works hard, who saves hard, who invests, who creates jobs, is being penalised, and all this money is being used to benefit Benefit Street. So it's no wonder that the growth rate is going down.
My honourable friend is absolutely right, despite the chuntering we hear from the Minister. The welfare bill is forecast to rise to £406 billion over the forecast period. The Chancellor keeps saying she's fixing welfare. Where? What is she doing? she had to back away from very modest savings. We've identified £23 billion worth of welfare savings, and the honourable member could follow those if he wished to, but he doesn't. And that's why growth has once again been downgraded. And the Chancellor boasts about beating the forecast last year. Well, the forecast at the beginning of the year was 2%, and the government failed to get anywhere near 2%. They beat the downgraded forecast. So let's not hear more about that. We want to hear what the government's actually going to do to drive growth, and taxing the people generating it is precisely the wrong thing to do. And finally, I turn to new clause 10, requiring the Chancellor to review the UK carbon border adjustment mechanism. And we had a lot of debate on this in the committee, and a great swathe of the bill in schedules is set out on CBAM, but there's plenty more to come. And given the complexity of this policy, many industries believe the absence of a formal oversight process and review process in the bill is a serious misstep and needs to be addressed. And there are many potential pitfalls in this new mechanism. Firstly, the measure fails to consider several sectors at significant risk of carbon leakage, such as chemicals and refining. Secondly, the government has decided to link UK emissions trading to the EU trading scheme. And since the announcement of that alignment, the price of carbon in the UK more than doubled, costing our economy around £5 billion if those prices had held steady. We should be reducing the burden of carbon taxes on business, not increasing them. And the EU has yet to publish its benchmark beyond 2030, meaning the UK would be signing up, effectively giving Brussels a blank cheque. And CBAM does not address issues with carbon leakage in export markets either. And there are proposals to exempt our manufacturing exports from UK ETS costs and CBAM to make the industry more competitive, putting it on a level playing field internationally. Has the Minister considered maintaining long-term free allowances for products destined for the export markets? So given those complexities, and I could go on about more, but the Minister gets the gist, and I think he should recognise the. I think other honourable members may want to come in on this issue. I think the Minister should recognise the value of regular reviews. And I know he'll say that the government keeps all taxes under review, but let's have an actual review that then is published so we can actually see what's happening. And therefore, I encourage honourable members to support new clause 10. So, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a finance bill full of tax increases that break trust with the British people. The Labour government has introduced the family, farm and business tax, frozen personal thresholds, hiked taxes on savers and investors, cut relief on employee ownership trusts, taxed inheritance pensions, taxed taxis, as we discussed in committee, and increased gambling, alcohol and other duties and environmental levies. The list goes on and on. There's 534 pages worth, which I could read out if there was appetite for that. So our amendments would back the taxpayers and investors and the businesses trying to drive growth in our economy, and I urge honourable members to support them. Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I join the Minister in thanking honourable members on all sides of the House who joined in the debate, and there's rather more of them here than there have been throughout those proceedings. And I also thank the parliamentary staff and honourable members who chaired the committee. In this 534-page finance bill, the government has chosen to impose a raft of tax-rising measures that hit work, enterprise and investment and add significantly to the regulatory costs on UK businesses. They have extended the freeze on income tax thresholds, dragging hundreds of thousands of more working people into higher tax bands. They've introduced the family farm and family business tax, targeting rural communities and family firms. And they have increased taxes on savings, property income and long-term investment. Taken together, these measures amount to billions of extra taxation, pushing the overall tax burden to ever-record levels. Ultimately, the Chancellor, in her decisions, has chosen to make the UK a less attractive place for businesses and for the investors that we need to grow the economy. Just last week, the OBR cut growth projections again. At a time of global uncertainty, the government is taking the wrong course. And it shows. Unemployment is up, taxes are up, welfare spending is going up, and living standards will slow over the course of this Parliament. This government has led the country into a high-tax, low-growth doom loop. Now, there's a long list of voices sounding the alarm over the economy, but the Chancellor is still not listening. Rather than change course, she is sticking to her failing plan of higher taxes, higher spending and borrowing. This is a bill that breaks the promises to the British people, and we will be opposing it this evening.